What happens when a grieving widow, 2 children, and an Apache scout are forced to depend on one another in a land filled with danger, prejudice, and survival? Their choices will shape not only their lives, but the future of their community. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Arizona Territory, 1878. The merciless summer sun beat down on the small frontier town of Willow Creek, where dust devils danced between weathered wooden buildings. Martha Wilson stood on her porch, her calloused hands gripping a letter that confirmed her worst fears. Her husband James, who had left 3 months ago to work at a silver mine in the Northern Territories, was dead, killed in a cave-in that had claimed the lives of 14 men. Martha's eyes drifted to her 2 children playing in the yard. 8-year-old Benjamin was throwing rocks at an old tin can, his sandy hair matted with sweat. 6-year-old Emma sat quietly under the lone cottonwood, lost in her own world as she traced patterns in the dirt with a stick. They didn't yet know they were fatherless. "Ben, Emma," Martha called, her voice cracking. "Come inside now." That evening, after tears had been shed and the children had finally fallen asleep, Martha sat at the kitchen table, a single oil lamp casting long shadows across the room. James had left them with some savings, but not enough to last through winter. The small farm they had started would need tending, and the debts would need paying. Martha was a skilled seamstress, but in a town where most folks barely had enough to feed themselves, there wouldn't be much call for new dresses. As dawn broke the next morning, Martha made her decision. She would sell their farm and move them to Phoenix, where her sister lived. There would be more opportunities there, more chances for work, and perhaps a better life for her children. "We're leaving Willow Creek," she announced over breakfast. "We'll go to Phoenix to stay with your Aunt Sarah." "But Pa's coming back," Ben protested, his lower lip trembling. "He said he'd teach me to shoot when he came home." "Your father isn't coming back, Ben," Martha said gently. "Remember what I told you last night. He's gone to heaven now." "I don't want to go," Emma whispered, clutching her rag doll. "This is our home." Martha reached across the table and took her daughter's small hand. "Sometimes we have to leave home to find a new one. We'll be all right." 2 days later, a knock at the door interrupted Martha's packing. She opened it to find Charlie Thompson, the town's only shopkeeper, standing awkwardly on her porch, hat in hand. "Mrs. Wilson, I've got someone here who might be able to help you," Charlie said, gesturing to a tall Apache man standing a respectful distance away. His long black hair was tied back, and he wore a mixture of traditional clothing and settler attire. A fine-looking bay horse stood nearby. "This here is Nako. Folks call him Eagle Eye. He's been working as a scout for the Army, but he's looking for more permanent work. I thought, with your situation and all, you might need help with the farm." Martha eyed the Apache man cautiously. Relations with the native tribes had been tense, but this particular man was known in town as one of the peaceful ones who had adapted to the changing world. Nako stepped forward and spoke in clear, accented English. "Mrs. Wilson, I am sorry for your loss. I knew your husband. He was fair to my people when others were not." He paused. "I hear you wish to sell this land. It is good land. I can help you work it until you find a buyer." Martha hesitated. "Mr. Thompson, could you give us a moment?" After Charlie left, Martha spoke frankly. "I appreciate the offer, but I've made up my mind. We're leaving for Phoenix as soon as I can arrange passage." Nako nodded. "The city is no place for children who know the open sky. Your son needs to learn to be strong in the ways of this land. And I see your daughter watches the books on your shelf with hungry eyes. She needs to learn how to read the words, not just look at them." Martha was taken aback. "How did you know Emma can't read?" "She's of age to start learning, but with James gone so much ... double quotes, she trailed off, embarrassed by her failure. "I watch. I listen. It is how I have survived." Nako's dark eyes held no judgment. "I cannot read the white man's words either, but I know their importance in this changing world. Perhaps we could learn together." Martha looked back at her half-packed home, considering his words. "Why would you help us? Your husband stopped men from burning our camp last winter when they blamed us for cattle theft." He stood between them with his rifle and said, "Not these people. I do not forget such courage." As Martha weighed her options, Ben appeared at the door, his eyes wide at the sight of the Apache man. "Are you a real Indian?" he blurted out. "Benjamin." Martha scolded, but Nako merely smiled. "I am Apache. My people have lived on this land since before your grandfather's grandfathers were born." Ben's eyes grew even wider. "Can you teach me to track animals?" Pa was going to, but double quotes, his voice faltered. Nako looked to Martha, waiting for her permission to respond. In that moment, Martha saw something she hadn't considered. Her children needed more than just security and schooling. They needed guidance that she alone couldn't provide. "Mr. Nako," Martha said finally, "perhaps we could discuss an arrangement. Not as permanent hired help, but a partnership of sorts. At least until winter comes." That evening, as Martha tucked her children into bed, Emma asked quietly, "Is the Indian man going to live with us now?" "No, sweetheart. He'll stay in the old cabin by the creek. But he'll help us with the farm and maybe teach you and your brother some things." "Will he really teach me to read?" Emma's voice was hopeful. Martha brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "We'll all learn together." As she blew out the candle and stepped into the hallway, Martha wondered if she had made the right decision. But for the first time since receiving that terrible letter, she felt a small flicker of hope. They would stay, at least until harvest. And then they would decide what came next. The weeks that followed brought a new rhythm to the Wilson farm. Nako arrived each morning at dawn, working the fields with a quiet efficiency that Martha came to respect. Ben followed the Apache man like a shadow, pestering him with endless questions about tracking and hunting, which Nako answered with surprising patience. By mid-July, the corn stood tall, and the vegetable garden flourished under Martha's care. The arrangement was working better than she had dared hope. In the evenings, after the day's work was done, they gathered on the porch. Martha had begun teaching both Emma and Nako to read, using her family Bible and a tattered copy of Robinson Crusoe that James had brought back from a trip to Tucson. The man, look at foot, print and the sand, Emma sounded out carefully one evening, her finger tracing each word. "Good," Martha encouraged. "And how did he feel when he saw it?" Emma's brow furrowed in concentration. "Scared? Because he thought he was alone on the island." "That's right." Martha smiled, glancing at Nako, who was following along in his own book, his lips silently forming the words. "Reading is like tracking," he said suddenly. "You follow the marks to find meaning." Martha had never thought of it that way. "I suppose it is." From the yard came the sound of Ben's whoops as he practiced with the small bow Nako had fashioned for him. Martha had been hesitant about the weapon at first, but Nako had assured her it was meant for rabbits, not people. "Your son has a good eye," Nako observed. "He learns quickly." "He's like his father that way," Martha said, a familiar pang of grief washing over her. "James could pick up any skill if he set his mind to it." Nako nodded thoughtfully. "The boy needs to know his father's ways. Do you have stories you can tell him?" Martha realized with a start that she had barely spoken of James since his death. The pain had been too raw. Shouldn't I? For both of them." That night, after Nako had returned to his cabin, Martha brought out a small box containing James's possessions, his pocket watch, some letters he had written her during their courtship, and a journal he had kept sporadically. "Come here," she called to the children. "I want to tell you about your father." They gathered on her bed as she read from James's journal, sharing his adventures, his hopes for their future, and his love for his family. Ben hung on every word about his father's exploits hunting and prospecting, while Emma traced the handwriting with her finger, as if trying to connect with the man who had written them. The next morning, Martha found Nako examining the plow which had broken the previous day. "I can fix this," he said, "but I will need supplies from town." Martha counted out some coins from their dwindling savings. Get whatever you need. And perhaps some peppermint sticks for the children, if you wouldn't mind." As Nako rode toward town, Martha couldn't help but notice how much had changed in just a few weeks. The farm was productive again, the children were thriving, and she had found a measure of peace she hadn't thought possible after James's death. But not everyone in Willow Creek approved of their arrangement. When Nako returned that afternoon, his expression was grim. "What happened?" Martha asked, noting a fresh cut above his eye. "Some men in town had words for me," he said simply, unloading the supplies. "Words or fists?" Martha reached for a cloth to clean his wound. "Both." Nako stood still as she tended to the cut. "They said it is not right for me to be here. That a white woman alone with an Apache brings shame." Martha's hand froze. "Who said this?" "Evers and his friends. The ones who wanted to burn my people's camp last winter." Martha knew Frank Evers well, a bitter man who had lost land in an Apache raid years ago and had nursed his hatred ever since. "I'm sorry. This arrangement was my choice, not yours." "It was our choice," Nako corrected her. "But perhaps I should go. I do not wish to bring trouble to you and the children." "No," Martha said firmly. "This is my farm, and I decide who works it. Those men have no say in the matter." That evening, as they sat down to supper, Ben noticed Nako's injury. "Did you get in a fight? Did you win?" "Benjamin!" Martha scolded. Nako set down his fork. "Sometimes fighting is not about winning. It is about standing your ground when it matters. Is that why those men don't like you? Because you're Apache?" Ben asked with a child's directness. Nako exchanged a glance with Martha before answering. "Some people fear what they do not understand. They remember only the bad things that happen between our peoples, not the good." "Like how you're helping us," Emma piped up. "Yes, little one." Like that. Martha watched this exchange with a mixture of pride and concern. Her children were learning important lessons about the world, but she worried about the price Nako was paying for helping them. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Martha sat on the porch, unable to rest. She heard soft footsteps and looked up to see Nako approaching from his cabin. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." She moved over on the bench to make room for him. "I've been thinking about what happened in town today. Maybe we should reconsider going to Phoenix." Nako was silent for a long moment. "Running solves nothing. This is your home. The children are happy here. But what if Evers and his friends come here? What if they try to hurt you? Or worse, the children? Then we will face them together." His voice was calm but resolute. "My father taught me that a person's worth is measured by how they protect those who cannot protect themselves. Your husband understood this. Now it is our turn." Martha studied his profile in the moonlight, struck by the quiet strength in his words. "Why did you really offer to help us, Nako? The truth." He turned to face her. "Because I have lost my family too. My wife and daughter died of the white man's sickness 3 winters ago. When I saw you and your children, I remembered what it was to have purpose." Martha felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "My daughter would be Emma's age now," he said softly. "She was curious about everything, just like your girl." They sat in companionable silence, 2 souls bound by loss and the determination to forge a path forward. As the night deepened around them, Martha made a silent promise to herself and to James's memory. She would not be driven from their home by fear or prejudice. With Nako's help, she would create the future James had dreamed of for their children. "Tomorrow," she said finally, "we should start thinking about harvest. And perhaps we should teach Ben and Emma a bit more about your people's ways. If they're to grow up here, they should understand the land as you do." Nako nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. "Tomorrow, then." As he walked back to his cabin, Martha remained on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead, feeling for the first time since James's death that perhaps everything might be all right after all. August brought scorching heat and the threat of drought to Willow Creek. The creek that gave the town its name had shrunk to a trickle, and the farmers watched the sky anxiously for any sign of rain. Martha's vegetable garden required daily watering, a task that Emma had taken on with surprising dedication. "The plants are thirsty, Mama," she would say each morning, filling her small watering can from the well. Nako had begun teaching Ben how to find water in the seemingly barren landscape, knowledge passed down through generations of Apache who had thrived in the harsh desert environment. "Look for the cottonwood trees," he instructed, pointing to the distant horizon as they rode across the property. "They grow where water runs beneath the ground." Martha marveled at how quickly Ben absorbed these lessons. Her boisterous son was developing a thoughtfulness she hadn't seen before, observing the world around him with new eyes. Emma's reading was progressing too. One evening, Martha listened with pride as her daughter read aloud from Robinson Crusoe without stumbling over the words. Nako sat nearby, whittling a small wooden horse for Emma while listening intently. "You read very well," he commented when she finished. "Soon you will read better than me." Emma beamed at the praise. "Will you tell us an Apache story tonight?" "Please?" Nako glanced at Martha, who nodded her permission. "Very well. I will tell you about Coyote and how he brought fire to the people." As Nako's deep voice wove the ancient tale, Martha noticed how both children leaned forward, entranced. Even though the story came from a culture different from their own, its themes of courage and sacrifice resonated deeply. Martha found herself equally captivated, both by the story and by the man telling it. The peaceful evening was shattered by the sound of approaching horses. Martha's heart raced as she recognized Frank Evers' voice, loud and slurred with drink. "Wilson, widow, come out and explain yourself." Martha stood quickly. "Children, go inside now." "But Mama," Ben protested. "Now, Benjamin." Her tone brooked no argument. Nako had already risen, his posture alert but calm. "Stay here with the children," he said quietly. "I will speak with them." "No," Martha replied, squaring her shoulders. "This is my home. We'll face them together." They stepped off the porch to find 5 riders in the yard, Frank Evers at their center. The smell of whiskey hung in the air. "Evening, Mrs. Wilson," Evers called, his voice mockingly polite. "We've come to rid you of your Indian problem." "There is no problem here, Mr. Evers," Martha replied evenly. "Mr. Nako works for me. Fair and square." Evers spat on the ground. "That what you call it? The whole town's talking about the widow who took up with a savage." Martha felt her face flush with anger. "You watch your tongue, Frank Evers. What happens on my property is my business alone." "It's everyone's business when you bring shame to decent folk," said one of the other riders, a man Martha recognized as Pete Dawson, who ran the saloon. "What would your husband say if he could see you now?" "He would say that I'm doing what's necessary to keep his children fed and his land productive," Martha shot back. James valued hard work and fairness above all else. "Listen here," Evers said, his tone darkening as he dismounted. "We're giving you a choice. Send this Apache packing, or we'll run him out ourselves." Nako had remained silent, his face impassive, but Martha could sense the tension in his body, ready to defend if necessary. "Mr. Evers," Nako finally spoke, his voice carrying across the yard. "You have a quarrel with me, not with Mrs. Wilson. Let us speak man to man." Evers laughed harshly. "I don't palaver with Indians." From the corner of her eye, Martha saw Ben slip out the door, clutching his father's old hunting rifle that normally hung above the fireplace. Her heart nearly stopped. "Get back inside this instant, Benjamin," she called, but it was too late. The men had seen him. "Look at that," Evers jeered. "The boy thinks he's going to protect his mama and her Indian friend." Ben's small hands trembled on the rifle, but his voice was steady. "My pa said a man defends his family. Mr. Nako is helping us, so he's family too." A tense silence fell over the yard. Martha moved slowly toward her son, terrified that the situation could explode into violence at any moment. "Benjamin," she said gently, "give me the rifle, please." To her relief, Ben relinquished the weapon. Martha turned back to face the riders, the rifle now in her hands. "Mr. Evers, you and your friends need to leave my property now. We've done nothing wrong here." Evers looked like he might argue further, but another of the riders, older and seemingly more sober, put a hand on his arm. "Frank, this ain't worth it. Let's go." After a tense moment, Evers spat again and remounted his horse. "This ain't over, Mrs. Wilson. No decent man in this town will help you come harvest if you keep company with Apaches." As the riders galloped away, Martha felt her knees go weak with relief. Nako steadied her with a hand on her arm. "You showed great courage," he said quietly. "So did you." She looked down at Ben, who was watching them with wide eyes. "And you, young man, showed both courage and foolishness. Never touch your father's rifle without permission again." That night, after the children were finally asleep, Martha and Nako sat at the kitchen table, speaking in low voices. "Evers is right about one thing," Martha admitted. "I may not be able to find help for the harvest. Most of the men in town share his views." Nako considered this problem. "There are others like me, Apache, who work with settlers, who understand both worlds. I could ask them to help when the time comes. Would they? After how they've been treated. For fair pay and fair treatment?" "Yes," he hesitated, then added, "but it may bring more trouble from men like Evers." Martha sighed deeply. "This land has seen enough fighting. There must be a way for all of us to live and work together. My grandfather used to say that peace is not the absence of conflict, but finding a path through it that all can walk with dignity." Martha smiled tiredly. "Your grandfather was a wise man. He would have liked you," Nako said simply. As Martha prepared for bed that night, she thought about how her life had changed in the months since James's death. She had discovered a strength within herself she hadn't known existed. Her children were growing in ways that made her proud. And Nako had become not just a helper, but a friend she had come to rely on. The harvest would be a test of their partnership, of the community's tolerance, and of her own resolve. But for the first time, Martha believed they might pass that test together. The next morning, Martha was surprised to find Charlie Thompson at her door, hat in hand as always. "Mrs. Wilson, I heard about what happened last night," he said apologetically. "I want you to know that not everyone in town shares Evers' views." "Thank you, Charlie. That means a lot." "I've been thinking," he continued. "My boy Samuel is home from school in Tucson. He's studying to be a teacher. Perhaps he could help Emma with her reading. And Ben too, if he's interested." Martha was touched by the offer. "That would be wonderful. But aren't you concerned about what people might say?" Charlie shrugged. "People always talk. Doesn't mean we have to listen." He glanced over at Nako, who was repairing a fence nearby. "That man has proven himself a good worker and a good neighbor. My father taught me to judge folks by their actions, not by where they come from." As Charlie left, Martha felt a renewed sense of hope. Perhaps there were more people in Willow Creek like Charlie than like Frank Evers. Perhaps, with time and patience, they could build the community James had envisioned when they first settled here, one where their children could grow up strong, educated, and open-hearted. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson, Martha shared Charlie's offer with Nako. "It is a good sign," he agreed. "Change comes slowly, like water shaping stone." Emma, who had been listening from her perch on the porch steps, looked up from her book. "Mr. Nako, will you stay with us even after the harvest?" The question hung in the air, giving voice to thoughts Martha had been avoiding. What would happen when winter came? Would Nako return to his people? And why did the prospect of his leaving fill her with such dread? Nako looked at Emma with gentle eyes. "That depends on many things, little one. But I will always be your friend, no matter where I am." As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, Martha wondered what the future held for all of them. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer walking it alone. September brought the first hints of autumn to Willow Creek. The mornings dawned crisp and cool, though the afternoons still blazed with late summer heat. In the field surrounding Martha's farm, the corn stood tall and golden, ready for harvest. The day they had been working toward all summer had finally arrived. True to his word, Nako had brought 5 Apache men to help with the harvest. They arrived at dawn, solemn and reserved, but willing to work. Martha had prepared a hearty breakfast for everyone, and as they gathered around the outdoor table she had set up, she felt a nervous anticipation. "I want to thank you all for coming," she said, addressing the group. "This harvest means everything to my family." One of the older Apache men, who Nako had introduced as Taza, nodded respectfully. "Nako speaks highly of you, Mrs. Wilson. He says you are a woman of honor." Martha felt herself blush slightly. "I try to be fair, that's all." To her surprise, Charlie Thompson and his son Samuel arrived mid-morning, along with 3 other men from town. They paused awkwardly at the sight of the Apache workers, but Charlie stepped forward confidently. "Thought you could use some extra hands, Mrs. Wilson," he said. "Hope we're not intruding." "Not at all," Martha replied, relief flooding through her. "There's plenty of work for everyone." What might have been a tense situation gradually eased as the day progressed. The men worked in separate groups at first, the townsmen in one section of the field, the Apache in another. But as the hot sun climbed higher, practical necessity overcame discomfort. When one of Charlie's friends suggested a more efficient way to stack the corn shocks, Taza acknowledged the wisdom of the approach. By midday, they were working side by side, communication limited but respectful. Ben darted between the groups, alternately fascinated by the town men's jokes and stories and drawn to the quiet efficiency of the Apache workers. Emma helped Martha prepare the midday meal, a hearty stew that had been simmering since morning. "Do you think they'll all eat together, Mama?" Emma asked as they carried the food out to the field. "I don't know, sweetheart," Martha answered honestly. "But we can hope." To her relief, hunger proved a powerful equalizer. Though the men separated into their respective groups to eat, the invisible barrier between them seemed less formidable. Charlie's son Samuel even engaged Nako in conversation about the local plant life, his scholarly curiosity overcoming any lingering prejudice. By late afternoon, with the sun beginning its descent, more than half the field had been harvested. Martha watched with pride as the golden corn filled the wagons. It would be enough to sell, enough to keep, enough to see them through the winter and beyond. As the workers paused for water, Martha noticed a cloud of dust on the road leading to the farm. Her stomach knotted with apprehension as she recognized Frank Evers' wagon, followed by several riders. "Nako," she called, her voice tense. He was already watching the approaching party, his expression grave. "Take the children inside," he said quietly. "No," Martha replied firmly. "We've done nothing wrong. We'll face them together, all of us." Evers pulled his wagon to a stop, surveying the scene with obvious displeasure. "Well, well. Quite the gathering you've got here, Mrs. Wilson." Martha stepped forward. "We're bringing in the harvest, Mr. Evers. Nothing more. I see that. Got half the Apache Nation working your fields, and Charlie Thompson playing the traitor." He spat on the ground. "Reverend Parker won't be happy to hear about this." At the mention of the town's preacher, Charlie stepped forward. "Frank, the Reverend is right behind you, so maybe you should ask him yourself." Martha turned to see another wagon approaching, this one carrying Reverend Parker and his wife. The elderly preacher climbed down slowly, his wife supporting his arm. "Mrs. Wilson," he greeted her with a nod. "I heard there was a harvest underway. My wife has brought some pies for the workers." Evers looked dumbfounded. "Reverend, you can't be serious. These are Apache we're talking about." "I'm well aware of who's here, Frank," the Reverend replied mildly. "And I recall a passage from Galatians. There's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." I believe that principle extends to Apache and settler alike. Martha could have hugged the old man in that moment. Instead, she said, "You and Mrs. Parker are most welcome, and the pies will be greatly appreciated by everyone." Evers wasn't ready to concede. "This isn't about the good book, Reverend. It's about loyalty to your own kind." "My kind?" the Reverend echoed. "My kind are those who work hard, treat others with respect, and help their neighbors." He turned to Martha. "Like Mrs. Wilson here, who's raising 2 fine children on her own and keeping this farm going despite her loss." There was a murmur of agreement from the assembled workers, both white and Apache. Martha felt a swell of emotion as she realized that somehow, without her noticing, she had built a community around her, not the one she'd expected, perhaps, but one bound by mutual respect and common purpose. Evers looked around, sensing that the tide of opinion had turned against him. "You'll regret this," he muttered, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. With a sharp command to his companions, he turned his wagon and rode away. As the dust from their departure settled, an uncertain silence fell over the gathering. It was Taza who broke it, stepping forward to address Reverend Parker. "My people have a saying, a single arrow can be broken, but many arrows together cannot. Today, we are many arrows," the Reverend smiled. "A wise sentiment, sir, one that echoes through many traditions." With the tension broken, everyone returned to work with renewed energy. Martha found herself working alongside Mrs. Parker and the other women who had arrived with the Reverend, preparing an evening meal for the harvest workers. "You've done something remarkable here," Mrs. Parker said quietly as they worked. "Something James would have been proud of." Martha looked up in surprise. "You knew my husband well?" "He came to services whenever he was in town. Always spoke of you and the children with such love." The older woman smiled gently. "And he believed that this land could be a place where all people lived in harmony. I think he would be pleased to see this day." As twilight descended, the last of the corn was brought in. The workers, tired but satisfied, gathered around bonfires that had been lit to ward off the evening chill. Mrs. Parker's pies were distributed, along with coffee and the venison stew that Nako's friends had contributed. Martha found herself seated on a log between Reverend Parker and Nako, watching as Ben demonstrated to a mixed group of town and Apache men the tracking skills he had learned over the summer. Emma sat nearby, reading aloud to Mrs. Parker and several other women from her cherished copy of Robinson Crusoe. "Your children are thriving," the Reverend observed. "Despite everything, they've had help," Martha said, glancing at Nako. "We all have." As the evening progressed, Martha slipped away to stand at the edge of her property, gazing out at the harvested fields silvered by moonlight. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without turning that it was Nako. "A good harvest," he said, coming to stand beside her. "More than I hoped for," she agreed. "Thank you, Nako, for everything." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, before Martha gathered her courage to ask the question that had been on her mind since Emma had voiced it weeks ago. "What happens now? After the harvest, I mean." Nako turned to face her, his expression thoughtful in the moonlight. "Winter comes, the land rests, and then spring returns. And you? Will you stay through the winter? Do you wish me to stay?" Martha looked back toward the bonfires, where her children were now being taught an Apache clapping game by one of Taza's granddaughters. "The children would miss you terribly if you left. And you, Martha Wilson, would you miss me?" The directness of his question took her breath away. "Yes," she admitted softly. "I would." Nako nodded, as if her answer confirmed something he had long suspected. "Then I will stay. Not in the cabin by the creek, perhaps. The town has begun to accept me. I could find other work, build my own place. Or you could continue working here," Martha suggested. "As a partner, not a hired hand. This farm is too much for me alone, even with the children growing." "A partnership," Nako repeated, considering the word, "between an Apache man and a white woman. Some will never accept it. Some never will," Martha agreed. "But today has shown that others might. And isn't that worth something?" As they walked back toward the gathering, Martha felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be more confrontations with men like Evers, more prejudices to overcome. But they had harvested more than corn today. They had gathered the first fruits of understanding, the seeds of a new kind of community. Ben ran up to them, his face alight with excitement. "Mama, Mr. Nako. Taza says he'll teach me how to make a real bow this winter." Martha laughed, ruffling her son's hair. "Did he now? And what does he expect in return?" "He says I have to teach his grandson how to play marbles," Ben replied seriously. Nako smiled. A fair exchange. Emma joined them, clutching her book. Samuel says I'm reading well enough to start learning arithmetic next. And he says the school in town might let me attend after Christmas. Martha's heart swelled with pride and hope. Your father would be so proud of both of you, she said, drawing her children close. As the evening drew to a close and the workers began to depart, Reverend Parker approached Martha and Nako. Mrs. Wilson, I wanted to let you know that you and your children, and Mr. Nako, of course, are welcome at our services any time. Thank you, Reverend, Martha replied sincerely. We just might take you up on that offer. After everyone had gone and the children were asleep in their beds, Martha sat on the porch, listening to the night sounds of the desert. Nako joined her, bringing 2 cups of coffee. Your son is becoming strong, he said, handing her a cup. And your daughter reads better each day. Just as you said they needed to, Martha remembered. That day you first came here. And you, what do you need, Martha Wilson? Martha looked out at her land, at the home she had nearly abandoned, at the life she had rebuilt from grief and uncertainty. I needed to remember that I'm stronger than I thought, she said finally. That there are good people in this world willing to help if you let them. And that sometimes, the most unexpected friendships are the ones that save you. Nako nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then perhaps we have all found what we needed. As they sat together under the vast Arizona sky, Martha knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, a widow, an Apache scout, 2 children, and the community they were building, one harvest at a time.